We're excited for this session, just for teens and young adults. It's a Q&A for teens and young adults. And just as in the opening address, Pamela Atkins said that last year she had teenagers say, "Why isn't there just a session for teenagers?" And this is like that session. So welcome and thank you for being here. If you're a teenager here at UCAP, you're super cool. And we want to honor you for being here and tell you you're super cool because we need you. We need you to be caring about this issue and to be passionate about it. So we have a panel here of awesome guests. And my name is Karen Broadhead. I am going to be the moderator of our panel, and they've asked me to add little thoughts if I have them, but I think this panel is going to be so smart that I won't have to really say any of my thoughts. But I think that first we're going to just introduce ourselves. Each one of us is going to introduce ourselves and say why we are passionate about this cause, why we're excited to be here in this session. And then we each have a couple minutes just to say something to you that we would want you to know because we feel it's important before we get to our questions. Okay, and so for me personally, I would just say I am here because I'm so passionate about this generation because I'm a mother. I'm a mother of 3 sons and 2 daughters. And 2 of my sons have had an addiction to pornography, and then I have a 10-year, those 2 sons are old now, 30 and 26 years old. And then I have a 17-year-old son at home. And I feel so passionate about this because I know how powerful those sons of mine are. And the ones who have dealt with an addiction to pornography are actually even more powerful men than they would have been without going through recovery and becoming the men that they are because of that. And so I feel really passionate about getting the message out that an addiction does not mean broken, does not mean less than, it means you're awesome. And you are a threat to any darkness that this world has to offer, and that you have a warrior job to do in this world. That's my message, and my other message is that just like I said, the word warrior, I think we are at war. And I've noticed about your generation that you know that war is not for wimps. I've noticed that about you. And that you care about a cause and you care about doing important things. And it's cool that you're here because it says that about you. But I would say that just like addiction is like being a prisoner of war, the worst thing that someone could do is to accept that that's where they should stand, is as a prisoner of war. And to not buy the lie of, I have to stay there and keep that in the dark, because when there's liberty and freedom for people who are meant to be fighters and win a war, that's the best place to be. And so my message is, don't believe the lie that there's not someone safe to tell and that there isn't recovery, because there is. And just like my experience as a mother and my sons, recovery can make even greater men and women than you ever thought you would be, even without recovery. Okay, Natalie? So, thank you.
Okay, I'm going to stand just so you can see my face before I start talking to you for an hour. My name is Natale McAneney. I am the COO of Fight the New Drug. We are a nonprofit that educates on the harmful effects of pornography using science, facts, and personal accounts. And we focus our efforts primarily toward youth. I'm super passionate about this generation because I am part of this generation, and we've grown up with technology literally at our fingertips, and it's kind of changed the game for us. It's changed the game for, what we're seeing and how it's impacting our lives and our relationships. And I believe very strongly that it can be super cool not to be into porn. So we're all about changing the conversation. I also really want to emphasize that, one individual can make a really, really powerful impact on this, and that it's something that's really awkward to talk about with your friends maybe sometimes, but we can definitely get to a place where it's cool not to be into porn. So I'm excited to answer any questions you guys have. And I'm going to pass the mic over to Jason Carroll.
I'm Jason Carroll. I'm a professor in the School of Family Life down at Brigham Young University. My main message, I guess, if we're going to give you a key point, and I said this a little bit in my session this morning, I hope for the rising generation, as you become involved and speak out, that you have as much of a vision of what you're speaking for as you do what you're speaking against. And so part of that is this message that we talked about earlier this morning about the understanding of proper and healthy sexuality and where it fits in our lives and our relationships and preparation for marriage and family and all of those types of things. As your generation has a greater ability to discuss and to talk about that view and that vision, then you're not just standing against something, you're standing for something. And that's a different message, and that's a different way that I think many of us feel more of a sense of confidence, more of a sense of courage when we feel like we're standing for something than standing against something. So we'll talk a little bit about that. I've been involved with, I consult with a number of the groups in the anti-pornography movement and things that we're trying to do education-wise. Also be interested in questions or talking to you a bit about some of the research needs. I think sometimes there's an assumption that the research is where we need it to be in this movement. As someone involved in the research process, I can tell you that we need a much greater dedication to targeting and doing and conducting the kind of research that's needed as this gets into more of a social and cultural conversation. And so there's some ways there too that the rising generation can have a mindset of what types of evidence, what types of research, what types of information will be most beneficial to help us speak up and to be better heard in a broader context and with a broader audience.
Hello, everybody. My name is Zachary Andrews. I'm super nervous to be here. And I feel a little out of place, too. But I feel like, I'm 22 years old. I study psychology at Brigham Young University. And I have struggled with pornography since I was 11 years old. And I feel like that is my major contribution to this panel, or really to anybody, is that I'm not involved super heavily right now in any major organization, but I do know what it's like. I do know what it's like to be in some of your shoes. And I would like to mention, too, that I'm not out of the woods. I would like to stand here and say, hey, I'm cured. I have no problems anymore, but that is simply not true. But I do want to say that recovery is possible. And I guess my main message to those here today is that if you do struggle, to trust someone, to reach out. Because I've struggled for 11 years. But it wasn't until I reached out to my fiance and really told her about my problem that I really felt that somebody cared, that somebody loved me for who I was and was willing to help me through this struggle. And since then, I've opened up to many other people, and with each person that I come to trust and trust with my story and my experiences, I come that much closer to what I feel is true recovery. And so that is my contribution, I feel like, today. Thank you.
Sorry. Hi, I'm Kate Hawks, and I'm here with Voices for Virtue, which is a private nonprofit organization, and we're focusing on youth, run by youth, and one of our huge focuses is on living virtuously. We focus on, replacing, viewing pornography or, just any bad thing that you could be doing, with, doing something else. And so that's, kind of what we focus on, and that's what I want to say about that.
Hey, I'm Ethan. I'm just helping Kate out today, and we just have a few things that we're trying to do to get kids to be virtuous, and basically all we're trying to do is just to be a group of friends and have fun together and learn to stay out of that bad stuff and do virtuous things instead. So that's basically what we're here for.
Okay, awesome. I forgot to mention that I'm with the company Life Changing Services, and I also wanted to point out that this is an issue for young men and young women, and that's so important to remember, that we're here to talk to young men and young women. Okay, panel, our first question is this. Is it considered a porn addiction if instead of watching videos or looking at pictures, I read erotic stories, and even, I'm sorry, I can't read that word, and even, what if it's not that frequent?
I love that question because it gets us into what is sometimes an oversimplified conversation. I think we use the term and idea that someone has a pornography problem or has been involved with pornography, and the immediate assumption is, well, it must be an addiction, right? The best way to think about this is really a continuum. So if you want kind of an analogy, instead of thinking of it as like a light switch that goes on and off, right, where you have an addiction or you don't, it's better to think of it as a dimmer switch, right, that moves along that continuum. And you think about patterns of habits. And there can be any range of habits and patterns that we move along and can experience, whether it's the narrative stories. I think we should, capture that pornography or sexual media can be read, it can be watched, it can be listened to, right? But we want to appreciate and understand that, because I think both in how we understand ourselves and how we understand others, we want to be careful about assuming addiction or moving to the addiction label too quickly, particularly for teens and for young people, that it is possible to have a habit, even a habit that is harder to kind of get away from or to change, and that doesn't automatically mean that we're in a pattern of addiction. Definitely as we see things that become more entrenched and are harder to move on from, and we reach out to others, some of the things that have been said have been great, then we might see places where that type of label would be more appropriate. But I think having that understanding, having that appreciation of there being a continuum of habits, right? And that some may reach a point that we'd label them more of a compulsive or an addictive nature. But the reality is all of us, right? We don't want to separate pornography either and turn it into some kind of unique issue. All of us have things in life that we develop these habits and these patterns that we're evaluating. Are they in harmony with where I want my life to go, right? What about technology right now and the use of technology and how much some of us is the very first thing we look at when we get up in the morning is our phone. The very first thing we say, last thing we say goodnight to at night is our phone, right? There's other things that we look at in life too, and pornography can have that type of pattern. So be careful about labels. Labels are really powerful, and in lived experience and patterns we get a better sense of that. But we sometimes see people feeling like they don't have control or they take too much of a label of themselves or others if they jump to that type of term. But at least in that idea of different types of pornography, I think we want to look at consequences rather than just behaviors. And there's any number of types of media or patterns that we can start to consume that may not fit with what we're hoping for.
Mm-hmm. Do any of your other panel members have anything to say about other forms of pornography besides just pictures and videos?
I guess the one comment, if I could add anything, is going along with this. I loved your definition right there, and that it starts with smaller things. It starts, and it's not an addiction like the light switch like he was explaining. It is like this dimmer that kind of goes on, but over time those habits, those things can get stronger and harder to break. And so to be careful that not to get in that thought process of, oh, it's only this. It's only just erotic reading material. It's only that. But that's where it starts, where it can become more of a habit, more of a problem, and eventually, possibly, not guaranteed, but possibly leading to an actual addiction.
Okay, next question. You guys are so great. You've handed us lots of questions, so we're gonna try to get through as many as we can. What if one of your friends is openly using pornography during school and think it's unharmful, and you don't have the courage to tell them to stop? Yeah, Cade, what do you have to say about that?
I'd say a lot of things in life just take a lot of courage. And the main thing I would say about this is to find the good way to go about it. I mean, sometimes just a brutal confrontation of something like this is, a little harmful to them and makes you, become less of a friend. And that's what you're worried about, is the friendship in this situation. You're not worried about, that or whatnot, but you just really need to find a good way around it and, make sure that they know, what they're doing. It's not a good thing, I guess.
I'll just add one thing to that. In my own personal experience, I do feel like the more information you have and the more well-educated you are on this topic, the easier it is to approach your friends and talk about this. So if you really know, what the harmful effects of pornography are, if you really have a sense across the board how they can affect individuals, how they can affect relationships and society, if you really understand that, it's so much easier to open up a conversation. I would also say, whenever you're talking about this issue with anyone, it's really, really important to remove shame from that conversation. So the last thing you want to do if somebody is struggling with this is to make them feel shamed, is to make them feel, uncomfortable to approach someone for help. So I would just say be as open and honest and loving and receptive as you can, and let them know there are resources out there for help. Educate yourself on what those resources are. Maybe have some other friends or some parents or some family members kind of have an open dialogue with as many people as you can about this so that you also have other resources.
Okay.
He's got a question.
Oh, sorry. So focused. Do you have one? Good, thank you.
Is this on? I just wanted to follow up on that because aren't there, I've heard there's actually legal ramifications to someone being caught with pornography in schools. So I'm curious as to whether or not you want to avoid saying something and how that would affect you, because I know that there have been some situations where people even have been affected and gotten in trouble for not saying something. So is there advice in that direction?
One of the changes we have seen is how quickly pornography can disappear now in the school context. It's not like the old generation where somebody brought a magazine, right? And the school administrator or whoever shows up and what do we do with it? Now it's as easy as tapping the screen and things shift and change. We're definitely seeing more attention to this, though. I think it's an evolving issue. We've seen a lot of attention to the sexting thing that starts to happen now, where it's actually students taking pictures of themselves, things that are getting circulated, getting posted. So I think your caution is a really good one, to be mindful about what position does that put us in. I liked what Natalie was saying about if this is expressed with concern, and maybe that is something that could highlight too, is I don't want to see you get in trouble. I don't want to see things be inappropriate. I think there's also a little bit of a distinction too about how it's being viewed. If that student is just in a setting like that, is looking at it personally and privately, is usually looked at a little bit different by school administrators than someone who's trying to disseminate or trying to get that seen by other individuals too. So, but your comment's a good one. It shows complexity there that we want to safeguard ourselves, and young people want to be thoughtful about the awareness is growing, and we want to be careful not to be a part of just kind of covering up or looking the other way or not expressing concern for our friends and others that may pretty unwittingly get involved with some of this when it becomes common those ways.
Okay. This one is directed first for Zachary. What does recovery look like for you, Zachary? How have you been able to help others? And then this one right along, that's along the same lines. What is some advice you would give to someone who is in recovery?
I feel like the first thing that I want to make mention of is the difference between recovery and sobriety. I used to work at an addiction recovery center that specialized in like heroin and cocaine and all these things. The same principles kind of apply. One time as I was driving these people to one of their Narcotics Anonymous meetings, one of them from the back just asked me, hey, what's the difference between sobriety and recovery? And I thought it was going to be a joke, but they actually really wanted to know what the difference between the two was, and I've had a lot of time to think about that. In recovery, if some of you go to these ARP meetings, Addiction Recovery Program meetings, people count days. They count days. I have been 5 days clean, or I've been 1 month clean, or I've been 2 years clean. That is sobriety. Time away that you've been clean from something. Now, recovery has to do with becoming better, becoming something more than what you were, to actually recover from the addiction, to not want to do it any longer. Because one person, just taking drug addiction, for example, one person could spend 10 years in prison, and 10 years clean, right there. But they could get out, and the next day, they use drugs because they still want to. And so it's losing that desire to actually want to view pornography, to use pornography. And so that's what recovery is for me. That, of course, sobriety is part of that I have to be clean. And there's not a set number of days. I can't, tell you that you have to be this long, and then you're recovered. But that if you are continually trying to be a better person, trying to stay away, trying to not want to, then I would consider that recovery.
Okay, would you consider sexting pornography addiction?
I'll take a crack at it. So that's a really interesting question. First of all, Jason talked a little bit about the term addiction. Could be a spectrum, so I would say struggling with pornography or struggling with sexting perhaps instead of that. There is some legislation, a few states, as to kind of go off of your comment, that sexting is illegal in a few states. It can be considered child pornography, as often if it's a youth taking images of themselves or passing along images of other people that are under the age of 18, that can be distribution of child pornography. So it is something that, as youth, you maybe think, well, everybody does it, oh, it's no big deal. But it actually is a pretty serious thing. I would say, in terms of, again, it's the spectrum of pornography, kind of going back to, can erotic literature be considered pornography? We generally ask people, I don't want to define for somebody what pornography is, but I will say that if it leads you to objectify others, if it is the exploitation of others, if it leads you to kind of all of these same things that something you can easily identify as pornography does, then I would say it's probably not a healthy activity. So as far as struggling with sexting, it's absolutely something that someone could struggle with. I would also say it is, something that could be really dangerous. Sometimes if you're in a relationship with someone, you think, oh, I'll just send them this picture, it's not a big deal, but down the road, that could be distributed to anyone and everyone. There are a lot of revenge porn sites. I'm sure some of you have heard of those, which is kind of where, maybe somebody broke up and then they had this sexted image of someone and they've uploaded it to a site. So it can become pornography in that sense, that it can be directly uploaded to things like that. But it is a really serious topic. And if it is something you do struggle with, or people who do, or of it being an activity that is happening, I would encourage you to maybe talk to an adult or talk to someone that you trust kind of about that and see, what you can do to maybe make a choice that is more healthy for you or your friends. Anybody else?
Okay, this one says, whenever I'm tempted to view pornography, I feel that I forgot who I am. My morals and the ability to care about my morals are gone. I don't feel like myself. How do I wake up how do you wake up when you're being tempted? It's a great question. Those are all such good questions.
It's a great question because the answer is actually inside of the question, right? That very awareness of that sense of I'm not being who I want to be. I'm not in touch with those things, which is part of why we want to understand and this great idea about changing the desires, changing how we view it, right? This is never going to work as just kind of a white knuckle approach that I'm just going to kind of resist that temptation. I've got to change how I see it, how I experience it. Everybody, whether they're just trying to avoid pornography or they're recovering from a more serious habit or pattern, it's about changing what it is, seeing pornography for what it is. All of the draw of pornography is based on individuals giving into the myth of pornography. Pornography presents a myth, and you have to accept the myth for it to be attractive. With a young audience here, this will make sense. It's a little bit like watching superhero movies, right? We've got all these superhero movies now. It's all Avengers and Iron Man and all that kind of stuff. Well, if you're watching a movie like that and someone sits there the whole time saying to you, oh, that's not real. That could never happen. Oh, yeah, a wormhole over the top of New York, whatever. Aunt May, she's been hanging from the side of that building for like 12 minutes. She's like an 80-year-old woman, and she's been hanging from the side of that building, right? What do you want to say to somebody if you're watching a movie like that and they keep saying that to you? That's not real, that's not real. You want to say, shut up, right? I'm suspending reality. I want to believe in superheroes and wormholes, and I'm giving myself over to this so I can enjoy the movie, right? Pornography operates the same way. You have to suspend reality and see what it wants you to see. That's why this morning's keynote was so beautiful, right? Because that was trying to remind us to say, what are you really seeing? You see a whole person. If you see a whole person that truly is not just their body, but is also someone with talents and history and a growing up and friends and hobby and a full person, you'll start to see something that's not attractive. It's really quite sad. It's troubling. None of us would want to see our loved ones in that context, right? Because we know our loved ones as whole people, right? So that's what's happening. That's what I love about that question, is that we realize that, hey, I can see that and I have strong motivation, but then I start to drift and I'm tempted. Everyone has to find a way. Someone asked the question, what does recovery look like? What does staying away from pornography look like? It's about keeping your motivation level high. It's not just avoiding the behavior. What works for you? We often use the language of people creating daily rituals. What gets you in touch with your motivations, right? If it's something that's a religious belief for you, if maybe it's a family member, maybe it's a particular song that gets you back to that. Wasn't that wonderful the way the music touched us this morning? We felt it. We got back to that real emotion of seeing real people. You have to do those things all the time to keep your motivation level high so you see things for what they really are. It can't just be a behavior. If this just is about doing behaviors, not doing behaviors, the motivation level is going to dip. There's going to be a time that we're down. There's going to be a time that we're not aware of that. That's the idea. Recognize a myth. Know that it's a myth. Try to see what's really there. The desire will go down. It'll become sad to you. It'll become something you don't want to see. And then you're not fighting a temptation that's strong. It's something you can actually push away pretty easily because you know what it really is.
Okay, this is directed to the youth that represent Voices for Virtue. I just wondered, what were some, so there's all those temptations out there for you, and like you talked about the urges, wanting to maybe look at porn. So maybe what are some ideas of things that you can do besides porn?
Okay. Well, first, before I even answer that, I think it's important, to keep your mindset clean, I guess. And one thing that we actually do with Voices for Virtue is we have a thing called #VirtueStrong, and you sign up for it at a website called virtuestrong.org. And basically, you'll get these text reminders throughout the day, sometimes, 3 or 4 times a day, and it just gives you uplifting messages, things that, are inspiring or help you keep the right mind track, to veer away from pornography. And that's something that really is helpful nowadays, you know, because you turn right, you turn left, you go straight, you know, there's pornography anywhere, and it's just about trying to stop viewing it intentionally. So things that we can do in our daily lives is, that's actually what one of the things we focus on is replacing that with virtuous living, with, you know, replacing, I don't have the problem myself, but going and exercising instead of it, or going and, you know, doing art or something, you know, replacing it with something productive, or I guess, you know.
I think that also if you surround yourself with good people and good friends, then it really helps you, because the people that you spend a lot of time with tend to like influence you a lot. So keep good friends and be with your family and be around people who are really good influences on you, and it'll be a lot easier, I'm sure.
I just want to add one quick thing to that. You know, if there is somebody who does struggle with pornography, it doesn't mean that they're not a good person. You know, it just means that they maybe need your help, they maybe need that support, you know, to help them get to a place that is a bit more healthy for them. But just to remember that, you know, if you do have friends, you don't have to completely disown your friends, but maybe just, you know, work to help them get to a better place.
One thing I was going to add, there's nothing more frustrating to a good person than to know I value not looking at pornography. I do not want to look at that. And then to get to this place that this person described where all of a sudden I have the ability not to do, I don't remember why I cared, and my morals are gone, and it feels like I'm not myself. And then how do you get yourself to wake up? One thing I think to mention there is if you're struggling in a place where you're noticing that pattern is happening over and over again, and you're unable to recognize, I'm falling asleep in the early stages of falling asleep, like you get way asleep to the point where you'll go do things that are outside your value system in a pattern a lot. It happens a lot. That's a sign that you could use some support. So just to know that it's important to know when you could use some support, that this just isn't me doing that bad thing again that I keep trying not to do. It's important to know that if it's a pattern and it keeps happening, that's when it's really important to tell people that you could use some support, because there's lots of support out there, and it can help you feel so much better about yourself. Okay, just curious about your opinion as to why there's not a female porn addict represented on this panel. How can we help young women have courage to get help with this issue?
That's a great question, and I'm glad whoever asked that. This ribbon I'm wearing today is from an organization that is trying to start up that is representing and trying to do research specifically on females who struggle with porn and on their male partners who, you know, are having the same kind of betrayal trauma response to that. So just as a culture, you know, we've kind of gone about this thinking that pornography, boys will be boys. Pornography is something that men do. And pornography in and of itself objectifies women. So it's kind of set up in our brains that males struggle with this and women struggle with, you know, the expectations that they have to be like these women in porn. So it's not to say that that's not happening, but we also, pornography influences and affects so many women as well, and there are many women who are struggling with this, but they feel so much shame because culturally we've decided that women don't struggle with this. So it's so much harder. We've kind of set up a system where it's so much harder for females who have struggled with this to come forward and ask for help because they feel like, I'm the only one, you know, this is a guy thing and I'm a girl and I shouldn't struggle with this. And we've kind of trained ourselves to think that, and that's not the case at all. You know, pornography, the pornography industry is smart, and they are targeting individuals in a way that hooks people. That's their goal, and it's working. And those harmful effects don't discriminate based on whether you're a male or whether you're a female. You know, it's dangerous either way, and men and women can struggle with it. So parents in this room, it's important that you don't just think, well, I have all daughters, so I don't need to talk to my daughters about this because it's not a problem. My parents have all daughters. they never talked to me about this because they assumed that it wasn't a problem. And although I didn't struggle with it, it doesn't mean that it wasn't all around me. It doesn't mean that I didn't have boy friends or male friends or friends who were girls that didn't also struggle with this, and that I had no idea how to handle it because my parents hadn't talked to me about it. So I think as a culture, we really need to be aware of that. We need to know, if you are a female in this room and you are struggling with pornography, there are resources to help you. You're not alone, you're not weird, you're not different. And the same if you're a male, I mean, it's something that anybody can struggle with, and we need to be aware of that.
I do a little bit of research work for Fight the New Drug, and some of you may be aware of their Fortify program. Our last look at the data showed that 15% of our users of the Fortify program are female. So it's about 1 in 7. We'll see where those rates go. Natalie's absolutely correct. The pornography industry right now is targeting women. They feel like they've got market saturation with men, and that's now the untapped market. So they're literally talking about strategies and ways to try to make it more appealing to females. And so it's something we want to be very vigilant about and see that pattern, because we clearly see that, and particularly in the rising generation and the cell phone generation group. I think we're going to see a bit of those numbers move a little bit.
I wish to ask a follow-up question. There was a lady in the morning session who talked about women addiction, and she told me that 1 out of 3 addicts is a woman. So, and then I shared this information with a friend while we were having lunch, and she said, "Oh, maybe women are more, they're more likely to come forward to say, hey, I'm an addict." So I wonder if you can comment on that.
I think it's a bit of a mix of whether or not they're more likely to come forward. I think Natalie's right. In some ways, we've created a bit of a context that may make it harder for women to acknowledge this or to get the help they need. There's even a deeper sense of shame that somehow I'm more unique or I'm more problematic or whatnot with that. I think we'll have to see. I think it varies in different populations and different age groups of things. We don't have a really good data on it. But I think it is helpful for us to just keep acknowledging that it is men and women. It is young men and young women, and that we keep that broad lens, because we definitely see it happening for both groups, and with some unique dynamics for each, too, that we are going to want to pay attention to those gender issues. I think some of the myth, I think some of what we've seen as targeted strategies are things like increased narrative content of the pornography. So it's a little bit more of kind of a show or a novel or something that you get invested in, but then the pornographic content's embedded in that. A lot of language about strengthening of relationships rather than turning away from relationships. So they try to target it in ways that they've seen that to be just more acceptable to it. Plus, there's just a lot of digital online living. A lot of people spending tremendous amount of time consuming media, and that stuff moves into those kind of directions. And the mainstream content is becoming more sexualized as well. So the line of what some people are even labeling as pornography is getting blurred, and that's where I think we get more uptake.
But I do think that what Natalie mentioned, that there are lots of resources out there for young women, not just for young men, and we're seeing a greater need. I think several companies are noticing this. This is an issue for young women, and we need to have places for them to come for help. I know our company has several groups just for young women online and in person, and we've just appreciated. As soon as we said they're open, they filled right up. So it's a need.
Can I add one comment? I just want to reaffirm to anybody that we love you, that your voice will be heard if it is spoken, that there are resources, as they've been saying, and that this is an issue that is coming up that we care about, that it's something that you can also get involved in with too. And I just wanted to add that reassurance that we do love you and that we do care about you.
There's lots of questions up here about parents and children and why can't parents talk about sexuality, and how do I tell my parents if I'm afraid? There's lots of ones that sound kind of, here's another parent one. How do I help my family members who are having a hard time with pornography? So if you could just maybe a blanket question about how families can talk more openly about it, how to be brave enough to tell your parents if you need to, and if you're a parent, how can you talk better about sexuality with your children?
I think a huge part of this is just being a little more open about it, you know. We put this, you know, in the dark, in the corner, you know. We never openly talk about it with our families. I know my family, we have talked about it a few times, but, you know, it's an awkward conversation, you know. You're like, you know, like when I go to church and, you know, they start talking about it, everyone just kind of looks down and, you know, just, they don't, you know, we have to start bringing it more openly out and start answering questions and start, you know, helping each other and realizing that, you know, more than just one person struggles with it, you know. I'm sure, you know, 15 people struggle it just in my little quorum at church or something. I'm sure there are more people who struggle with it than we realize. And it's just about confronting it in a more open way is what I would say.
Yeah, I was just going to say that, like we said before, just don't have any shame about it, because really anybody could be struggling with the same problem that you are. So don't just think that you're alone and you can't do anything about it. Just make sure you can be open about it, like Cade said, and just don't be ashamed about it, because anybody could be in the same situation as you.
I guess I don't want to go too much in detail about past things that have happened, but there have been good times that I've opened up, and there have been bad times. There have been times when I was a lot younger where I opened up or it was found out, and the experience, the conversation, the things that happened afterwards scared me so much that I never wanted to open up to anybody again. I never wanted to speak about it. I could do this on my own. I can do it. Because I felt like a bad person, the way that it was handled. And if you felt that way before, opening up again takes a lot of vulnerability. Being vulnerable is one of those key things, is being able to be vulnerable to the potential repercussions, I guess you could say. And so for those that don't struggle and, you know, potentially have the opportunity to, you know, interact with somebody, maybe it's your child, maybe it's a friend, your husband or wife, previously thinking about how would you handle this situation is key in my mind, to almost even practice it by yourself. If my loved one came to me today, how would I handle this? What would I say? I feel like we don't give that enough credit, that practice beforehand. And so when we give ourselves that little bit of a buffer room, instead of being surprised, because when we're surprised for an addict or for a user or someone who struggles, we want to lie. We want to say, no, I'm not into that. And then that closes the conversation off. Or for somebody that doesn't believe that their son or daughter or friend could ever be into that kind of a thing, when it comes up, they want to reject that. They want to stay away from that. And that's where I feel the problems come from, is that we're not prepared to talk about it. And so preparing ourselves for that is essential.
I think from the parent side of things, too, I think that's one of the pitfalls if pornography is made out to be a separate, independent issue. Hopefully we're raising our children from the time they're very young. One of the first things we have to do as parents is embrace the idea that we're raising sexual beings, acknowledge that about our children. Don't have the idea that somehow that's not our children wouldn't think or be interested in or curious about, or right, from the very, very beginning. And from when we teach them when they're very young, and we teach them about safety and stranger danger and special parts of your body and all these kind of things, we're trying to create a context and a setting where this is a part of life that we share. It's a part of the shared journey that we can talk about and that we're comfortable with, that it's not something that is outside of that. When it's something that's never been talked about, they sense that we're anxious and we're concerned about it, we're the last person they're going to talk to. Billy on the bus is going to get the questions before we do. And he knows a lot because he was on Wikipedia last night, and he can give me some good answers, right? So it's as much about tone. It's really just about tone and openness, and this is an openness for ourselves about this dimension of life. So I'd also be about looking for the resources around teaching about healthy sexuality and how to do that, even from young ages, and to do it in a developmentally appropriate way. So when these things come, there's a different relationship context to try to address them. For some of us, that might make us feel like, I haven't done that as well as I'd like to. Well, it's never too late. It's always better to start that pattern and to create that context so that this isn't something that we just wait, I hope I don't have to talk about that. We know it's coming. We know this is the reality that our children live in today. We need to be engaged and be the guide by the side with this part of life, not something that we're just kind of hoping passes us over or doesn't touch our families.
Yeah, that's so helpful. So here's one that says, how can I best help someone who's reluctant to get recovery, but you know that they need it? How can you help someone get recovery when you know that, and they're resistant to it?
Take them to get ice cream.
That's a good one.
Yeah. You know, just a quick little story I'll tell at my house. I mentioned I had two sons. My older son is, he never told us about his struggle with pornography, and I wasn't the kind of person or parent that knew how to talk very well about things. His younger brother, my older son, went on a mission, and while he was on his mission, we found out about his younger brother. When he came home from his mission, he was shocked to notice that we were having open conversations with his younger brother about his addiction at the dinner table. And he thought, all those years I could have said something, but I thought I'd be kicked out of the house if I said something. And here this proves that if I would have said something, my parents wouldn't have died. We all lived through it. It was really hard, but we lived through it. So just to know that that's a critical thing to be able to share, and that if someone isn't ready for recovery, they can get there if you just love them.
Got a question for Ethan. What if there's a lot of kids here? What kind of projects is Voice of Virtue involved with that might help them become active immediately? What's some things they could do instead of porn?
Well, I'd just say, just do virtuous things. I don't know. It's, well, we have this one thing called Random Acts of Virtue, and we do it on Facebook, and we have we have like 1 million people following us, and it's pretty crazy, but it's just a group of kids just doing their best to be good kids, really, and have fun, and try and stay off of the edge of the cliff, just stay inside and not have to go through the recovery process, but just keep doing good things. I don't know.
Okay, Michael?
Can I make a comment?
Maybe just
Louder?
talk really loud. Talk
How about
really loud.
louder?
Yeah, talk loud.
My first name is Mike. Okay. All right, just want to make a comment. As I've been listening, this topic brings a lot of people to the table for the first time. First time they talk, and trust, and feel. And my invitation to all of us is to talk and trust and feel all along the way, not just when this topic hits the fan. There's a good chance that if we turn on the switch or the dimmer, whatever you want to call it, turn the dimmer up, that we'll get ourselves into a rapport with each other that will allow for this topic to be discussed and perhaps resolved before it becomes a problem. So it's a bigger picture, it's a lot bigger picture.
Good. I have lots of questions up here that want to know how you were exposed to pornography and how long did it take you to tell your parents? Lots of those.
I'm assuming that one's my job, but I was 11 years old, and it started as a curiosity. And it came as a combination of the fact that my family had just recently moved to a new place, and I had no friends, and I was bullied at school. And I had nothing that I felt really brought me happiness. And when I was fiddling around on YouTube, I came across things that made me happy, I guess you could say, quote unquote. And I will avoid all details outside of that. But situations like that happen all the time, in a sense. I wasn't looking for it. In fact, I didn't know what it was. But it made me feel good. And so I didn't ever tell my parents because I didn't know what it was. And then one day, my dad found me with it. And that was where the scarring event took place, because I don't know, and I love my dad, but I don't know if he knew how to handle it at that time. And we've had family members that he knew that went down a really dark road. And so I know out of his best, the greatness of his heart, he was trying everything that he could to help me. But I guess that's my story on how it began. And I didn't tell my parents. They found out, and that was the hard part.
Okay, we have like 2 minutes, so we'll take one last question.
Dr. Carroll, you mentioned that different or better research is needed on this subject. What kind of research would you like to see?
There's a general assumption that the research base is stronger than it actually is. And so, I mean, if I say something as simple as, we do not yet have a targeted study on pornography prevalence in the United States using a nationally representative sample. We still don't have that, right? And so we're very much, and I'm very supportive of it. I want to be careful with how I say this. The advocacy, the get the word out, we know the harm, but generally people respond to that according to three kind of groups, right? We have people who really resonate with the message, right? If you've ever heard the phrase preach to the choir, they're the choir, right? And nod their heads. Then you've got a group that probably doesn't really matter what you show them. It's not going to change their mindset. They're kind of pro-porn and not really interested. But there's a movable middle out there in our culture and in our society. But they're going to be very interested in the facts. They're going to be very interested in the data trends. They're going to be very interested in it's not just your moral perspective or your religious perspective. Do you have anything that really kind of backs that up? And so both just kind of general prevalence trends and understandings of those trajectories and patterns. We definitely need some more in the areas of the brain research and understanding that. That's all expensive stuff, right? So a research movement to go along with the advocacy movement is going to be pretty critical, particularly if the movement's going to go to what I'd see as the next stage or the next phase, where it's going to get more into that movable middle, and it's going to need that kind of dialogue. So anybody you know that who's the big donors who can do, we really do need a generation that's as mindful about how do we get all of that kind of evidence and make sure the research base is as strong as we would like it to be, is not happening too much. We've got more advocacy than we do research going on right now.
All right, that's all the time we have for questions, and we have so many more questions than we answered. So if you'd like to come up and talk to the panelists personally, that would be great afterward. But yeah, we are out of time, so thank you so much for being here, and we appreciate you. Thank you. We're going to give you a hand for being here.